Hello, this is Bevan Neiman and with Perceptive Souls, and welcome back to our Conscious Entrepreneur series. I'm so excited here to have our next guest, Justine Luzzi, who I've known maybe for about 5 years or so, and we were in an online Facebook leadership group together. And I've just been watching your career expand, and I'm so excited to talk with you, to vibe with another, intuitive empath about all of life, your journey, your business, and why you do what you do. So for those of you who are tuning in, Justine is an intuitive, spiritual guide, and an emotional healer. She's an empowered empath who actually lives in New York City. And before we got on, she shared with me that that's probably one of the number one questions she gets asked by clients and people who see her on Facebook and online is, how do you do that? How do you do that with so many human beings and so much energy? So welcome, Justine, to the series. We're so happy to have you here. And I'll turn it over to you for a moment just to kind of let us know what that's like being an empath in NYC.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. So all those things are very true. I've been living in New York for about 6 years now, and everybody asks me how I do it. But the truth is that if we get into more of an empowered place as an empath, we could really do anything. And the truth is, I would say the number one thing is that no empath is the same. And meaning that there are certain things that energize us and there are certain things that don't. They obviously drain us, but we have to, that's where part of like the awareness comes through, is that we really need to understand the types of like what our triggers are and what does energize us and what drains us. So for me, New York has always been, I grew up over the river in New Jersey. So I was coming here like maybe like once per month. Like it turned out to be like every few months, but I always knew I was meant to be here because every time I came into the city, I realized like I would just get so energized because if anybody's been there, they know like bright lights, big city, lots of different people, lots of cultures. You know, I came from a small suburban town where there wasn't much going on, same types of people. And like that really energized me, and it really had like this energetic pull. So it's almost like I couldn't not be here. And that's the part that really keeps me here. And there's different tricks that I do. I live by myself. I don't mind paying, it's not cheap here. I don't mind paying the extra money for my sanity and I can't live with roommates anymore. I did that in my early 20s. It was not a good thing. But I live by myself. I make sure that, I control when I see people. I work from home. I set that up. So it's really just about, again, being aware of what your triggers are, what energizes you, what drains you, and that kind of thing. So basically the message is you can make anything happen. We're all different. And if you want something, you can definitely get it. Being an empath is not a curse, as lots of people start to think it is. So.
Absolutely. And it's like, you're crafting your own lifestyle, which includes your business. And you have a very spiritual business. You help people who are awakening to their empath gifts, to their spiritual awakening. You help to guide them and to provide messages and coaching and so forth for them. But at one point, I guess you were an atheist, right? And you had your own spiritual awakening. I don't know if you want to just share just a little bit about what that was.
What a story. Okay. So basically, I grew up, like I said, in the suburbs, but my parents put me in Catholic school my whole life. And I just remember like we would go to church every single day. And I just remember having these feelings like, intuitively, because I've always been intuitive, right? But just not aware of it. That something was not necessarily aligned. A lot of stuff that they were saying just did not resonate, and it didn't feel good. Something about, a lot of like shame, a lot of guilt about certain things, lifestyles, and it just didn't feel good to me. And as we all know, especially intuitive empaths, like we really need to lean into what feels good. So I just like when I got out of Catholic school and I went to a public high school, I just like went the other way, like to the extreme, which I usually do, right? So I go to the extreme, and sometimes empaths do like an all or nothing thing. I think you understand what I mean. So I went all the way to the other end of atheism. And then I just really stuck with it from there. And basically that was from like 14 years old until, you know, I carried it throughout my 20s. But funny thing is that like I would say little things like, everything happens for a reason. Like I would just say that. So I felt like it was always like an underlying like truth that was there. I just didn't want to acknowledge it from all the religious trauma that I experienced. So at 27, due to a really bad breakup with a narcissist, I was drinking and driving at the time. So I actually got a DWI and was arrested. So basically not my finest year. And everything kind of came crashing down. And basically I had like this massive spiritual awakening that I say massive because so that was about 7 years ago. I'm 34 now, 7, 8 years ago. And I think back at it, and I've been talking to people in the last 7 years, and not a lot of people have it. So like mine was like literally like a crash. Like I just crashed. And it was because of those two traumas, but it was also because I was in massive misalignment. And that is something that we really take, like a lot of people kind of take that for granted in a way, where it's like, we really need to lean in and be purposeful and intentional. That really energizes us. And the more unintentional we are, the more we're misaligned. I think the more it drains us and we're not really aware of it. So I really came crashing down because of all those reasons. But basically I had a spiritual awakening and I just woke up. And the best way I can kind of say that is like, I went to bed one way and I woke up the next day with like a different consciousness level. It was pretty nuts. But basically for the last 7 years, I've been kind of working through my spiritual healing. And it's been a journey. It's been tough. But finally, this year, I thought like it was a long journey and I thought I was pretty good and I can rest for a little bit. And then I actually started having panic attacks. So I was like, wait a minute, I just spent 7 years healing myself from all of this stuff, from like childhood traumas. I went through in my childhood, like childhood emotional neglect, which is something a lot of people don't talk about or don't really understand what it is. And basically it's just, it's the absence of emotional validation and empathy through a family system. So my family is very notorious for that. We don't talk about feelings, people say, get over it and, stop crying and basically invalidate you. Right. So I actually had a lot of that stuff that I thought that I healed spiritually throughout this last 7 years, but I started having a panic attack when COVID hit because I was actually spending time with my family because New York City got bad a little bit, like in the beginning, like March. So I started having panic attacks and I'm like, wait a minute, I just spent so long like doing the spiritual work, like what's going on? And then I actually realized it's part of the body responding. So so there's this other half of healing that a lot of people don't really understand. And it's the somatic part. So basically it's the idea that the emotions get trapped in the body and it really has nothing to do with your spirituality. And it doesn't have anything to do with that kind of stuff. So for me, that's the last piece of my awakening, is the integration piece, right? It's like connecting my spirituality and my body. So that's I'm kind of almost at the end of that journey now, but it's been so eye-opening.
Yeah.
A lot.
Wow, it just strikes me how parallel like our journeys are, because about 8 years ago I had like this massive awakening as well, and I went on this journey and have done the somatic work and all the layers and the emotional layers, and thinking, okay, am I done yet? And that healing process is just a continuous unfolding. And for me, maybe you have a similar experience as we continue to open that and to look at that and to understand it at a deeper level. We just get more aware and more conscious of those patterns. And for me, it still is intense, but it goes faster. The healing process is accelerated. It seems to flow forward. Or as soon as I go into it, I realize, oh, this is what's happening now. At the beginning, I didn't know what it was. I was like, what is this? Why is all this coming up? Why are these relationships coming up? Why is this stuff? Why are my emotions like all on a roller coaster? And now it's just like, oh, okay. And instead of months or years of that. It just like, it's a couple of days or a week, and I write it and I go, okay, I know what this is, and I know how to take care of myself. And so I love what you're bringing here. Is like, it's all these different dimensions. You know, we heal ourselves on the mental level, the emotional level, the spiritual level, the physical level, the financial level, the familial level. Like, all of this healing contributes to us then being really empowered as an empath. When did you realize that? I mean, you knew you were intuitive, but when did you realize that you were actually an intuitive empath, that this is who you are, and you sort of got into that place of like, oh, I'm gonna learn and grow about this and understand this?
Yeah, so that was the very beginning of my awakening, because I just remember Googling like, how come I can't move on emotionally or something like that, because the process, because not only was I going through an awakening, and by the way, I actually call that, like, especially if it happens massively the way that it happened with you and I find that very traumatic. I actually spent some of that last 7 years actually healing from the trauma of that, because what happened, the thing is about spiritual awakenings is that I have a feeling that a lot of people perceive it as you just start doing yoga or meditating. I think they think that's the experience. I've gotten that from my family. They don't really understand the depth of what you go through when it's way more internal. It's way deeper than that. And it's not fun.
It is the dark night of the soul, right? They call it the dark night of the soul for a reason.
Exactly. And basically it's just, it's like a massive unlearning and then a massive healing. And then you empower yourself and you just kind of go through like that's what I feel was the cycle for me, was like literally unlearning, then you're healing from it, and then you empower it, and then you go to the next thing, right? So you intuitively move to whatever's next. So basically I remember just literally Googling, and then these articles came up about an empath, and I started reading them, and like by the first paragraph, like the clouds parted. I never knew that I could actually put a word to how I was. And I always knew that I was different. It was always me that was the problem. Like, I'm too sensitive and I'm always the problem. That's part of my childhood trauma too, is because it's not true that I'm the problem, obviously. It's not that I'm being too sensitive, it's that they're being too insensitive. So basically, I just always knew something was up, but I finally got the name to it. And that really changed everything, because then I started diving really deep into what I actually needed. And the truth is that life isn't, I hear a lot, like I said in the beginning, about people calling it a curse, but it's really such a blessing. And it's so, if you can move into a place of feeling like it's a curse and into a blessing by being, disempowered to empowered, you can definitely do whatever you want, including being a leader. So I hear a lot of this, like a lot of people think they can't run their own business, that they can't live in New York, that they can't do certain things, which, do we have to modify a lot of different things? Absolutely. Again, that's coming back to how we know ourselves and really discovering ourselves. But we can really, if we can do it correctly, we can do anything we want. And again, include being leaders. And we need more empathetic leaders for sure.
Absolutely. I think our current situation shows us across the world, but particularly in the United States, it shows us we could really use a lot more of compassion and connection and listening to people, and, incorporating diversity and all of those things that we really want in our world, which is a part of what this series is about, is how do we bring greater consciousness to the planet? So I'm assuming at some point in this journey you're describing, you were like, I feel called to do something with this. I feel called to make a difference. What sparked that with you? What created this desire in you to like make it a business and to go down that road of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so part of the awakening as well is that part of it was removing a lot of limiting beliefs about what I was supposed to be doing with my life as far as making money. And at the time, like I mentioned, I was misaligned with a lot of things. I was drinking a lot. I was in an abusive relationship with the narcissist. And I was also doing work that I didn't care about. And it's funny because I was a communications major. I wanted to be a journalist because, as the truth seeker that I am, I wanted to find out the truth and maybe work for a network. Soon enough, I found that being in the news 24/7 was not good for me. Again, are there empaths that are journalists? Probably. And that's something that they figured out that they can handle, or they work around it. But for me, it was not what I wanted, where I wanted to be. So I ended up going back for my master's in communications, in digital communications, because I started realizing that, oh, I can use my communications degree to maybe do like digital marketing or something like that. And I ended up in digital marketing miserable. Actually, the year I had my spiritual awakening in 2013, I got laid off 3 times in that year from that particular business, that industry. And it was pretty much the universe saying, like, it's really time to move on. It's really time. Basically, I got that clue, and that was definitely a course correction. But basically, I was moving more into doing more work to help people. With college, I was actually on the side. I was a server and a bartender. And I never really realized I was working my purpose, meaning that I was holding space, especially as a bartender, for many people. And I would be the one that, I would go to parties, and then people would, the girl in the bathroom would only want to talk to me, that was crying about her boyfriend and like all this stuff. I was actually living it, but not really realizing it, and realizing that I was getting a lot of joy from that. So I figured that out during my spiritual awakening. And I also got the call to, it's so funny, I tell this story all the time. Like, I just basically was like meditating one day, and I got the call to, it's like, you're going to be a spiritual leader. And I'm like, I'm atheist. This is so weird. But then I realized I'm talking to someone, right? So how atheist can I be? So it was a lot of shock. Like, that's what I mean when I feel like a spiritual awakening is somewhat of a trauma, because you see life one way 1 second, and then the next it's completely different. So I really kind of figured out exactly, what path I should go on. I started getting my coaching certification. I started doing readings online. People were receptive to that. So I really moved my life more into, serving other people and using spirituality to do that. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh gosh, you bring so much there. Yes. And, it's kind of this series of awakenings, right? So there's like maybe a really big one, and then it's like awakening maybe every single day or every time you go into meditation, there's like another realization and insight. You're like, wow, and some are life-changing, as you go through that. So what is it that you really love about doing intuitive readings? Because I started doing that about 4 years ago at local holistic fairs, and I just love helping people through the cards and doing that. So how is that for you?
Yeah. So part of my spiritual awakening, on top of all the stuff I already talked about, is that my gifts pretty much blew open. That's the only way I can kind of describe it, is that I always knew I was intuitive. Like, I would actually say things, and then they would come to fruition, and people would stare at me like I was crazy. And I'm like, I don't know. I kind of always put it to like their thoughts, right? So a lot of people that are very intuitive, which I believe everybody has the power to do it. It's like a muscle, basically. So you have to exercise it. But I think a lot of people think that they're just thoughts, they're just thoughts, but they're not really. The stuff that comes to us is really intuitive hits. And people they try to push it off as thoughts. And obviously, like a lot of different things that are intuitive, like deja vu, thinking of someone and they call you, those kinds of things are intuitive abilities. People just, again, don't chalk it up to that. But my gifts became very, very strong during that time. And the spiritual teacher that I was working with during this time, she suggested the cards, because then I can kind of bounce off of them, because I started really getting too much information. Like, it was almost, I did as much isolating as I possibly can during my spiritual awakening, but like still, if I would like go outside, I would get like a lot of messages, downloads, all of that stuff. So she suggested that I start using cards to kind of use as a divination tool to bounce off of that and kind of get a little bit clearer of what was kind of coming through. So I started using that. And this morning, I got just the greatest validation of like what I do. I was doing a reading for a private client that I've been reading for about a year now. She said, she reminded me, she's like, we've been reading together for a year. My life is so great. You really helped me with the guidance. Like, I know, like, you're not the one that's like changing my life. I know I'm making the changes, but like just your guidance and like with your guides and my dominant guides are angels. I work a lot with like angel communicating and stuff like that. So she just gave me the greatest validation, because she's living her purpose. She's doing Reiki. She's selling crystals. Like, she's almost out of like her really not so great relationship. And like just over a year's time, like I really helped her move toward a more aligned place. And it just made me feel so good. So, I mean, it's such a great avenue for me, because I'm on top of being an empath, I'm an INFJ. So Myers-Briggs wise, I'm the natural. Yeah, you too, right? Get along.
So we're advocates, the counselor, all those things. Yeah,
exactly. And everyone says to me, like, you missed your calling as a therapist, but in my opinion, I don't think that I did. I have to have spirituality somewhere in there, and most psychologists don't necessarily go that route, and this is just a way better route for who I am and who I can help and serve. So
yeah. And this is like the most important thing, for having a conscious business, is being able to, yes, you want to be able to support yourself and be financially supported, and, be smart about your business and all those kinds of things. But it's that journey that you take your clients on, and you see them making this transformation and empowering themselves. That's what I hear you saying, is that like when you're working with someone over a period of time, just watching that transformation is so special and so amazing, that you get to actually be that spiritual leader in that person's life.
Yeah. And a lot of people, so readings are very interesting, because a lot of people, I think there's like a stigma around like you're supposed to tell them what's going to be happening, like this idea of the fortune teller, but it's really not like that. Really what I'm doing in a reading is I'm picking up your feelings, your thoughts, I'm really just validating your experience basically, and just helping you create a better future by picking up the present. Do some things that maybe future-wise do come to fruition, yes, but that's not the point. The point is that we're working together and co-creating, and I'm helping assist her with guidance that is aligned with her soul too, right? Not like making sure that we're going past the ego, and making sure that we're doing things on a soul alignment and getting her back into flow. So it's not necessarily about, I'll tell you when you're going to marry your husband. It's more about like, how can we make a more aligned decision in your life today? That kind of thing. So yeah, it's like such a weird, I guess, stigma around it these days.
Yeah, and I'm glad that people are moving past that. I think, a lot of people had called themselves psychic in the past, and that had a certain connotation, and there was like, people are charlatans and this kind of thing. And, even when I've done readings, people are like, well, I want to know exactly this thing, and are we going to be together? And I'm like, well, it doesn't work that way. It's not predictive, because everyone has free will, but it will read the prevailing energy of what's happening, and bring things that are at the subconscious, unconscious level up to the surface, so that, and I don't know if this happens for you when you do readings, but clients often go, oh yeah, and they already know all of this is already present. It's just bringing it right there in focus, and then allowing them to go, okay, I'm going to look at it now. I'm going to make this decision now. And those decisions are theirs. Those decisions are theirs. We're just a vessel for that work. So,
and at the end of the so that like win-win. So because they realize that it's exactly what they thought anyway.
So. Exactly. Yeah, it's amazing. One of the things that you have on your website, and one of the titles you call yourself, is an emotional healer. So can you tell us more about what that is? I resonate with that as well. I'd love to hear, how you define that, what that means for you and for the people you work with.
Yeah, so I work mostly with people's emotions, because my main goal is to have everybody become emotionally free. So that's why I do a lot of the things that I do, why I'm a spiritual guide, and why I'm an intuitive reader. And basically, I am more dominant in picking up people's emotions as an empath, meaning that when I'm doing my readings, for example, I could really kind of pick up how the person is feeling. And that's usually the first thing that I say. So it's really just, my whole life is kind of centered around our emotional states. I teach people how to become more of an empowered empath. And part of that, and a large part of that, is emotional regulation. So because I know exactly what it feels like to have all of these intense emotions and not being able to, I mean, it's painful. And again, going back to the somatic work, like our emotions can get trapped in the body. And I do both. Now I'm incorporating this because I say intuition is the language of the soul. So I do soul work, but emotions are the language of the body. So it's important for me to incorporate both. And it's just so important for me for everybody to be emotionally free, because that's really what the new inner peace is, I think, in the spiritual community, is really just, everybody just wants to be free, you know? So it's so important for me to work on that and really show people that's really kind of the end goal, besides all that guidance and alignment and stuff like that.
Yeah. I wonder if you've noticed, like with the sensitive people you work with, a lot of times they've sort of shut down their heart just out of self-protection, just because it's too overwhelming. They don't want to feel this. This is my part of my journey. I shut myself off emotionally for many years until someone said, "Do you ever feel anything?" And I was like, "What are you talking about? I feel everything." But, this is a part, I think, of the work that you're doing, is helping people learn how to open, how to trust themselves, how to trust others, how to use discernment, those kinds of things, right?
Yeah, definitely. And in my 20s, when I was, going through my atheist phase, I would tell everybody I don't have any feelings, and I would overdrink and binge drink, because the truth was that I had not just feelings, but all the feelings. And basically you just don't want to feel them. So there's a lot of different things, like people that have substance abuse issues, and, that all link back to the same thing, that we all just want to feel free of these really heavy emotions that we have. So that's what I focus on. And that's when I'm putting out an offer, that's really the end goal at the end of the day. Even with my readings, people feel emotionally free because I'm picking up on their emotions. I'm mirroring it back to them. They're being able to actually start the journey of being like, hey, well, maybe I do have this, maybe I do feel resentful. Maybe I do, and that kind of thing. So everything I do and all the offers that I create, it's really coming back to that one thing. So it's super important to me.
Yeah, yeah. And if we kind of wrap back into what you started with, which was talking a little bit about trauma, about especially family trauma, inherited multi-generational trauma. This is something you're really interested in now, is bringing not only the spiritual and the emotional piece in, but this trauma-informed coaching to add this other layer so people can be free. Can you tell us a little bit more? I know you've just kind of started on this journey of training for this, but obviously you've been training for this for probably a long time by doing your own process, right? Would love to hear more about what this is, because I think there's so much awareness now coming around about how important it is to do this healing.
Yeah. So when I first started my spiritual awakening, and before the readings, I actually got into the online space as an entrepreneur to do life coaching. And I remember I got my life coaching certification. It was great. I was having a great time. I had a couple of clients, but there was just something about the community that really turned me off. And I remember in one training of them talking about like a sales call where you have to almost shame somebody for not signing up with you, and that's like a sales tactic. And I think that was like the tip of the iceberg for me. And I'm like, this doesn't feel good for some reason. I don't want to be an entrepreneur if I have to do this.
Right.
And it really turned me off to the fact that I kind of thought that that's what the industry was. And I knew something was missing, but I couldn't put my finger on it. So lately, maybe some of the audience has heard of this, is that more and more coaches and leaders are becoming what you call trauma informed, which means is that basically just knowing that there is trauma, and not necessarily working on the trauma, but working with the trauma. So basically it's, this idea of coaching is to remove fears and remove blocks. But what are these fears and blocks at the end of the day? They're really just trauma, very, very deep trauma. So a lot of the times if you're coaching and you're, trying to move people forward and they can't get that result, you have to go like a little bit deeper. So I really feel like it's a piece that's missing in the coaching industry. And I'm just super happy that it kind of clicked with me, and it came right at the right time, because I had my own somatic experiencing practitioner earlier this year when I said I was going through a lot of panic attacks due to my childhood stuff. And basically it was life-changing. Like the panic attacks kind of went away, but I was also able to get back into my body after my awakening, after these last 7 years, and really experience the emotions through my body and releasing them that way. So, and with that being said, like a lot of doors have opened to me since then. Like it's amazing. Like I think it's the missing piece also in manifesting, is that a lot of people feel like, well, I'm thinking these thoughts, but if you have trauma that keeps you feeling like you don't deserve it, you're not going to get it. That's just, emotions play a big part in it, but a lot of people don't really understand that.
Yeah, yeah. And I think you bring up a really important point about sales and marketing in general, is that if you are, especially if you're doing life coaching, if you're doing spiritual guidance, nothing you do in your business should ever create more trauma, more guilt, more shame, more anything for a person. We affirm that anyone who comes can stay as long as they want, connect with us, and that you know exactly like what's right for you, whether you want to, solicit someone for business or not. Like this old school mentality of fear of missing out and all these things. I think this is what we're seeing with this conscious entrepreneurship and conscious business movement. And I'm so excited about it, that, people really are adults and people can really make good choices for themselves. And we don't need to do any kind of manipulation or, stick the knife in further in order to get someone to buy, and in order for us to be abundant as entrepreneurs. It's not necessary. When we do that from a place of alignment,
Yeah.
then people come who are meant to be with us, and other people will go to someone else who they're meant to be with, and it's all okay because there's no scarcity. So when we start to really dive into not only the trauma that gets created, in our own bodies, but even by society and by our culture, and the way that sales and marketing and the way that materialism and even capitalism has preyed upon us in some ways, we're actually hurting ourselves as a society. And so I'm excited that people like you and me and many others are going, you know what, I'm going to do it a different way. I'm going to do it a different way. I'm going to do it in a way that's conscious. I'm going to do it in a way that's loving and kind and empowering to the people who come. And I'm so glad to hear that you turned away from that part, because that's so important.
It's so important to know that being trauma informed is not just with coaching. It's already helping me with my readings too, because if you are a service provider of any kind, it's so important to have this training, and any leader of any kind, like breathwork facilitators, because that brings up a lot of like really heavy emotions. There's a lot of those people in the course that I'm taking now. So it's really important to understand that trauma can affect every different area, and every practitioner should probably take a look at that and become more conscious of that in general. So,
yeah. And you touched upon it. Not only do we have our own personal experiences as empaths, but we sense collective energy. That is the number one gift and or curse, if you want to say it that way. It's a challenge. I'll just say it that way, because I don't believe it's a curse. But when you can sense everything that's happening, and some of that feels really nebulous. You don't know where it's coming from. You might feel really exhausted one day, and you did nothing to bring that on. So understanding that there's also collective trauma, and there's also collective energy that we're processing, and having really good skills and practices to keep ourselves centered and grounded. You touched upon that earlier. If you wanted to give our audience like one piece of advice about processing collective energy. You already talked about using cards because it kind of like dissipates it and it becomes visual and real. Do you have any other practices that you use specifically when you sense that coming up?
Yeah, so I have like a lot of catchphrases, I feel like, but my one that I'm going to talk about now is that meditation is the answer to everything. It's basically what I say, because it really kind of is, meaning that if you're feeling overwhelmed, just try meditating. If you feel like your intuition is a little off, try meditating. If you feel like you have the monkey brain and monkey mind, try meditating. So I definitely feel like it's your number one tool. It's just to take space, take quiet time, and just try to connect, basically. So I always say meditation is like the biggest thing that you can do for it pretty much does everything. Honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And really just brings you into your own energy field, releases like all of those attachments and how easily we can merge and chameleon ourselves and all those things. It's like, okay, now I'm coming within and I'm getting really centered and really connected with me.
And people that say that they can't meditate, meditation is really just a conscious breath in and out. That's it. If you've done that and you're aware of your breath, you've meditated technically. So 5 minutes, 2 minutes, do the best that you can. You actually can't mess it up. So, I tell people just to try it and consistently try it, and they'll see a major difference. So,
yeah. Absolutely. This has been a fantastic conversation. We could probably continue to vibe forever and ever. But what I really want to do is let those listeners who are tuning in know how to stay connected with you. I know you have a Facebook group and a website. Can you just share a little bit about what's a good way to get connected and to tap into some of the readings and things that you have to offer?
Yeah, so mostly I'm active on Facebook. You can find me under, just type in Justine Luzzi and connect with me on my personal page. That's mostly where I go. I turned my personal page into a business page a long time ago, so you can connect with me there. I do free readings Tuesdays and Fridays, so I'd love, for people to hop on. And I always see it as a challenge for new people to see if we connect and I could read for you. I'm also on Instagram at Justine_Luzzi_intuitive. And those are the two social channels that I'm probably on the most. And my website is just JustineLuzzi.com.
Excellent. And we'll put those links under in the description box so people can get connected with that. So if there was any final advice or words of wisdom that you'd like to leave everyone with, just based on your own experiences or what you're sensing right now in the world, what would that be?
Well, since I am pretty connected to, I feel like for me, there is a very close connection with what's going on globally. And especially these days, there's a lot that's going on globally. So my final thing to say is that if you're an empath and you're feeling like there are things that are stopping you from becoming a leader or stepping more into that leadership role, I just want to say that we need you more than ever. Mm-hmm. We really do, because we have the one thing that is really needed for leadership, and that's empathy. And obviously intuition helps as well, but emotional intelligence, all that stuff, we have a lot of the qualities that would make a good leadership. So, whatever you feel is blocking you, start working on that type of stuff, because we really need you to show up, and it's important that we show up and we move into more leadership positions because we need more people like us. So
yes, and I highly, highly second that.
So important.
And leadership can look like lots of different things. It starts with leadership to self. It can be leadership in your family. It can be leadership in your community, even as a volunteer. So you don't have to be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company unless you want to be, but right. Or you can run a business if you want to. You can do whatever if you want to. But leadership just is how we show up every single day. We speak up. We hold our presence. We role model compassion and empathy and the world that we want to actually see come about. So thank you so much, Justine. I really appreciate you getting on and connecting today and sharing your journey. I appreciate your vulnerability and your willingness to just let us into your world. And thank you to everyone who tuned in today for the series. We'll continue to offer these amazing interviews with conscious entrepreneurs and conscious leaders, so that we can continue to spread the word that empaths are leaders. Empaths have a lot to give in this world, and we want to celebrate and uplift that. So thank you to everyone, and we hope to see you soon.